Glad to see everyone. And what got this started was that in December, Ariel and I were in a workshop, in a end of year meeting, and people asked, "What are you going to do next year?" And I said, this in 2023, I led one person to sign up to Flight for USA, to pledge not to fly, and she really liked it. And so I said, all right, next year I'm going to do 5 people. I felt like that was a nice big increase. And those 5 people registered before January. So I thought, I'd been thinking about changing the y-intercept, getting more people, but now I'm thinking more in terms of the slope of to what extent can I get people to not just think of getting more people, but how can I lead people so that people want to do this? So my goal for this hour is for each attendee, all of you, to feel empowered to inspire others to pledge, to live more sustainably, with when you lead them, when you inspire them, to expect that they will respond with gratitude, that they will feel an expectation that when they act, that they'll enjoy what they get, and that they'll have an interest that they'll have some expectation that if it goes well, they'll want to lead others so that others will feel that gratitude toward them, and that others can lead others and can lead others. So I'll give a quick overview of what I'm going to cover today, and then what will come next time. So first, I'm going to talk a bit about my origin and how I came to take on this sustainability leadership and not fly and so forth. And then how I originally tried to motivate people in a way that was not particularly effective. So how did that merge in or evolve into the Spodek method? And then I'm going to ask for a volunteer from one of you and do what's now called the Spodek method to hopefully walk someone through to not to pledge not to fly, because hopefully all of us have, but to practice to see this in action. Then I'll be available. Then I'd like to do questions after that. Then and I scheduled nothing after this. So when this ends, I want to finish on time, so if people have to leave on the hour, they won't miss anything. But I'll be available for questions after this. Then in 1 week's time, we'll meet, and the person who volunteered to do the Spodek method will then share how things went the next time, and we'll get to talk about a lot more about what went on so that you can do it. And I'll share also resources so that hopefully, if people want to learn how to do the Spodek method, they can. And also, I want to be unabashedly promote that I would love to do a workshop with people, like a really much more in-depth thing, so that you can really learn what's going on and learn with each other, because as a group activity, it's really, it can be very rewarding. And there are a couple of people on here who have done the workshop who were among the 5 people who pledged in January. Does that sound good? I'm seeing nods. Any questions before I get started? So I'll jump in, and I'll start by saying, I don't know how much people have looked up at me at all, but I never expected to be the person who was known as the guy who's living off-grid in Manhattan, which is where I am now, not just where I am physically, but also where I am in my path. That in May, it'll be 2 years that I've been living off the grid in Manhattan. So I do not have a Con Ed bill. I don't get an electric bill. And I'm living in more abundance than ever. I tell people this, and no one believes me. But and here's a crazy thing, is that there's 8 billion people in the world, and something like over half of us live in cities. And as far as I know, I'm the first person of 4 billion people to do something, to go off the grid, to try to go off a grid in a city. I mean, there's lots of people who are in cities that don't have grids or don't have electric, but they're still not trying to get off. And the big challenge is to get off the people who are using the most. So my flying situation is that, now it's been, I don't know, I think the last time I emptied my garbage was 2019, and haven't flown since 2016, but these are like the physical things that you can measure. Really, what I consider much more valuable is what I believe is my effect on others, that leading others to change, because I can only go to 0. I can't go much lower than that. But if I can lead lots of other people to change, and I can lead other people to change, to lead other people to change, that can really make a big difference. And that's what I'm really about. Now, okay, so the last time I flew was 2016. I um I really expected it to be a really terrible year. And in fact, after I committed, within a week or two, my sister was like, "Hey, I'm going with my kids to Japan. We got round trip to Tokyo for $800." And I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll start my year after I get back from there." And I thought, no, I can't do that. But I really thought it was going to be a difficult year. It was not. Within a few months, I really started enjoying, I didn't spend the time not flying crying about it. I found other things to do. I hopefully everyone knows stuff like this. I'm used to talking about what hopefully people found enjoyable experiences. Before, I also had some sense that I would enjoy it because I had several years before challenged myself to avoid packaged food, which I also thought, living in Manhattan, there's all sorts of food around, and I thought I would be really taking one for the team and sacrificing. And it was a challenge. I had to learn how to cook from scratch. But after I did, it was I found a rewarding experience. Now, I teach and I coach leadership, and I write about it. And when I realized that I enjoyed the experience, I had never gotten an experience before this, that I would actually like living more sustainably. It was always presented to me, and I believed without a second thought, it was deprivation, it was sacrifice. I wouldn't like it. And so I was very pleasantly surprised when I wasn't. But as a leader, that I liked it. From a leadership perspective, I realized I had always been motivated through extrinsic motivation. Here are the carbon levels. Bangladesh is going to be underwater. Here's what you have to do. And it was obligation. But here I was feeling intrinsic motivation. And I thought, from a leadership perspective, could I use intrinsic motivation to motivate people? So I was really enthusiastic about this. The first thing I did was arrange to do a series of talks at NYU with a bunch of my current students and alumni. And it went really badly because at first I thought, well, I just got to, well, I didn't think this way, but I thought, if I can just get people to try it, they'll like it. But I was actually coercing, cajoling them. And I was really frustrated. And I thought, oh, if you guys don't like this, fine, let it burn, Earth. But I stuck with it. And eventually I started my podcast. And on the podcast, I thought I would bring guests on one-on-one and ask them or get them to I wanted to walk them through what I walked through, which was just try it. I think you'll like it. But if you listen to the early episodes of my podcast, you'll see that, or you'll hear that a bunch of them, they could tell what I was doing. And especially with Seth Godin was the one that so he's this big TED Talk guy and he's a big marketing guy. And I'm talking to him. And when I say to him, I wonder if you could consider not flying for a bit. And he saw it coming from a mile away. So when I said that, he said, but my flying is so important that it benefits the world more for me to fly than not to fly. And this was really frustrating to me because that wasn't it was reinforcing the opposite of what I was trying to achieve. So I slowly learned a few things. That I learned that why I keep doing it. I keep not flying because I enjoy life more without flying, because it's rewarding, because it's liberating. But that's not why I stopped. And it wasn't even the proximal reason why I stopped was learning how much it polluted, but it's actually experiments before that I'd learned that there was some chance of me liking it. I've also learned, as maybe some of you have, that facts and numbers don't motivate people. To me now, and people probably know this, but to me now, to talk facts and numbers is to me like telling someone who smokes cigarettes about lung cancer. They're not smoking because they thought it was healthy. So giving them facts doesn't really help. And in fact, that if I engage on that, see, people don't, you probably know this, but stop me if I'm telling something you already know, but people generally, we feel like we act for rational reasons, but we tend to act on intuition or emotional reasons. And then we afterward rationalize and justify why we did it. But that rationalization and justification isn't really why we chose to do it. If I engage someone on why they don't fly, they'll give me the rationalizations and justifications. And by me addressing them on these things, that reinforces them. And I actually end up reinforcing reasons for them not to fly if I engage them on those things. Whereas instead, if I am able to engage them on the emotion, the reason that they do it, the stuff underneath, that's more effective. When I do that, then a lot of things happen. I want to stop here. Does anyone have any questions so far? Look like none so far. So I'll keep going. That the people have very powerful motivations relevant to the environment. This is probably my biggest discovery in all my podcasting and all the thousands of people that I've worked with, is that everyone, even if they grew up in the most urban setting where the only access they had to nature was like one tree or one dog or one soccer field, we still all have really deep, meaningful, motivational motivations and emotions relevant to the environment. Everyone has these things. And these would motivate people very well if they were out there, if people shared these things. The challenge is that our deepest motivations, our deepest passions tend also to be our greatest vulnerabilities. So we often protect ourselves and don't share these things. Because if you know what motivates me most, you can manipulate me. If you know what I care about most, you can laugh at me or poke fun of me. And we've learned to protect these things, especially in the environment, because so many people feel like they're being guilted and shamed. Even when they're not, they tend to feel that way. So the challenge is to make people feel comfortable sharing these things that make them feel vulnerable. If you are able to convey non-judgmental support so they do feel comfortable sharing these things, it actually feels very good when you expect that the person you're sharing these, if I share something that really motivates me, it really does, it feels really good if the person listens and supports and just confirms of how I feel. If I then can connect that motivation, that emotion to a task that's relevant, then that person will do that thing for their reason, and it will feel meaningful to them. It was funny when I hit on this, it's what I teach in other areas, and I didn't think it would work in the environment, but then I realized it's pretty standard how to lead people. And so I'm kind of torn here. I was thinking of describing what I came up with the Spodek method, or asking for a volunteer. And I think I'm going to prefer to go with a volunteer, because I think seeing it in action is a really great way to get it. And I never know how long it's going to take, because each person is different. But I wonder if I could get a volunteer from you to demonstrate the Spodek method. And it works out to be a fairly comfortable conversation that people really enjoy. Usually it takes about 20 minutes. And would anyone like to volunteer? And it has to be someone who will be back next week. I might have to volunteer Ariella, because I know her. And Ariella, would you?
That's fine. When I unmute, there's 3 teenagers in the other room, so you might hear some chitter chatter.
Okay. And so I'm going to motivate you. If things go well, then I'm not going to specifically try to get you to avoid flying, partly because I think you're already avoiding flying. And also, one of the things about this is that what you gain in working with intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation is that, well, you lose specific direction. I can't get you to do what I want you to do exactly. And I lose magnitude. I can't get you to do something really big. But what I gain if I do it, if it works well, is that you will feel meaning and purpose. You'll feel more motivation. So the first thing you come up with might not be particularly big, but almost everyone who does it, when I talk to them afterward, they do more than they committed to, which is what we're looking for. So, and Ariella, while we do it, you'll probably be meta thinking like, what's going on here? And I'm being watched and things like that, and participating. It's fine to do that. But ready to get started?
You bet.
Okay. Is the environment something that matters to you enough that you would act on it, or that you've acted on it in some way?
It is. And lately I've been feeling much more a part of the environment. I think it took me a while to get to this point that the environment was over there. It was outside. But now I see how we are really integrated. I mean, it's I'm thinking more holistically. I am the environment.
When you think about, were there any formative experiences that you had of, different people grow up in different areas. If you grow up by the beach, the environment is different than if you grow up in the mountains. Do you have any quintessential moments that, if I said paint a picture of the environment, that might come to mind of growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs in the Central Valley in California, with a lot of open space around me, a lot of agricultural fields. But I was in a college town, so it was still very suburban. My parents took us camping starting at a very young age, and my favorite trips were up to the redwoods in California, which are astounding and spiritual. And also, I think as a kid, I spent a lot of time outside, and that maybe is different for different generations, but I had to walk or bike to school every day, and that was just normal. So think that's...
Well, since you mentioned astounding, I have to go there because, and also I've never been to the redwoods. Can you, were there any particular experiences that come to mind?
I think the first thing about being in the redwoods is the grandness and the quiet of it, because there's like several feet of the dried out redwood needles on the ground, so it's very soft underfoot, and it's quiet, like being in the snow. So it's, you're there, like it's just an environment that's so different from other landscapes or forests. And then you look up and you crane your neck and you can't see the tops of the trees. They're just so tall. And some of the redwoods are the ones that are tall and skinny, and some are the ones that are wide and shorter. And you can't hug the tree. It takes 20 people to hug a big one.
Did you go there a lot? Were you just with family? Did you ever go alone, or?
Just with family. It was a big road trip, like a 6-hour drive from home.
And I guess your parents knew, like, bring them to this space. It's really worth it. Something like that. Yeah.
It's what families did because California is full of amazing nature and it's affordable.
And can you take us there with the, what other, you described like looking up, what's the full sensory experience? I mean, what's the smell? What do you hear? What else do you touch? What else taste or?
Yeah, so sensory experience, it feels soft underfoot. The trees, the trunks are soft and fuzzy in places, and or might be gnarled and burnt in other places. These are trees that have survived for hundreds and thousands of years. So they all have, you feel like an amazing sense of past history. And then the trees that have fallen become nurse logs and grow other trees and plants out of the logs. So even the dead ones have a legacy and keep giving to the forest.
Are there birds around? Is there other animals? Are there bears, or is it just the trees?
It's a quiet environment, and you have to sit still and watch to see creatures. But yeah, there are birds that nest at the very tops of the trees, and you would never see them. But they actually, there's a protected species, the marbled murrelet, that flies in 100 miles from the ocean and nests only there, only on that tree. Down lower in the campsite, there's blue jays that steal food and stuff and squawk. And then there's a whole understory of special plants that grow in the shadow of these trees, ferns and other dark leafed colored leafy plants.
And what emotions do you feel when you're there? Can you name them?
Very rooted and spiritual and otherworldly, like much bigger than myself. Like I'm in outer space, kind of, with these ancient giants. Yeah, sort of timeless too.
So timeless. I'm hearing wonder or awe. Is that, I don't want to.
For sure.
And spiritual. So here's the next step in the Spodek method is to, I invite you, if you're up for it. No, I just volunteered you, so no obligation. But based on the emotions that you described, of spiritual, of big, of almost in outer space, of wonder, I invite you to think of something that you could do where you are, and to manifest those emotions. I mean, you won't be able to get it exactly like there because there's nothing like that's exactly there, but to create some sense of, to do something that would create some awe where you are, or to create some spirituality where you are, with, if you're up for it, with 3 constraints. And the constraints are something that you're not already doing, something that you do yourself. So not getting other people to do something or teaching them. I mean, I'm not saying don't do those, but those are not this. We learn through our personal experience. And something that you don't have to keep track of this, but something that when you're done, you've somehow left the world better than you found it. Now, the goal is for you to create these emotions that I read as emotions that you like feeling. And also, I guess one other constraint, since we're meeting next week, something that you can either do in between now and next week, or at least get started enough that if it's something that takes longer, that you can describe of how things have gone. Now, when I do this, there's every now and then there's a few people who will say, oh, I've been meaning to do something for a while. I know exactly what I'm going to do. But that's rare. Usually people have to think about it, and there's a bit of back and forth. But do you want to give it a shot?
Sure. Okay.
Are you one of the people who happen to have something that you wanted to do, or do you have ideas of what you might?
I have a list of awe-inspiring things that I try to do already, but I don't get around to doing them regularly, and I always feel better after I've done them. It's just sometimes hard to fit into normal life. So I don't know if those count, or if this have to be like brand new thinking for me.
It doesn't have to be brand new thinking. It's just not something that was already scheduled for this week. So it could be something that you've had on a list. That there's a lot of people who are like, oh, this is my chance to do that thing I've been meaning to do.
Yeah. I mean, there are things I've done in the past and I know they're good for me. It's just like prioritizing.
Can you name 1 or 2, or what comes to mind?
Yeah. And I also feel like some people might think I'm like sort of far out, but I always feel better when I sleep outside. I have a deck off my bedroom, and when the weather is right, I can pick up my camping mat and pretend that I'm no longer in the city and I'm more part of nature. And I just find it incredibly calming. So if it's not raining, I can try that. I haven't done it in like a year, but I used to try and do it every so often.
Okay. So, and I have to say, I had someone who talked about this before, and I said, I'm going to sleep outdoors. And I went to the roof of my building, and I'm in Manhattan, and it was louder and brighter, and it didn't work, which is unfortunate for me. So if you hear envy in my voice, that's might be why.
Yeah, it is loud. It is bright. But there's something about, when I can see some stars and feel the fresh air on my face, then it's still worth it.
Now, all right, so this is something that you weren't already doing. It's something you do yourself. Is it leaving the world better than you found it?
If it resets me and energizes me to do, to be more present with people and pursue more activism, then yes, it leaves the world a better place.
Now, through experience, I've learned that what I have to specify a bit more here. It's really something that someone else could measure, like measurable. I'm not saying someone should measure it, but if it's just like at one point, I learned this from someone saying, I'm going to make someone smile. every day for a week. And it really was making the world a better place, but that's not what I meant. It's, something leaving things better than you found it.
Yeah, it's not probably directly measurable like that then.
So, could we make it that way? Is there some way that you doing this could make it that could change the world in some way, or maybe keep it on the table and think of something else?
Yeah. A longer term project. My daughter has a friend who has never gone camping, and I could organize a trip and bring her camping and share some of what I got to experience in my childhood. But that's not going to be done by next week.
All right, let's keep thinking. And by the way, it takes a while. Sometimes it can take a while back and forth. But I know that when we get through it, then people usually feel like, oh yeah, I've been meaning, yeah, this is so. Anything else come to mind?
I've got the typical foibles that I know I could try and do more with, but I don't, like the typical list of individual action or participation in group activism limited by time and capacity.
Sorry to interrupt. I forgot to say something that I want to clarify something I did not say that almost everybody hears. I did not say what's something you can do to fix the world. And it's really to bring you spirituality or the emotions that you felt when you were there. It has to not hurt the world and not leave it neutral. But that's not the goal. It's for you to manifest those emotions. I prefer you thinking not so much about how can I fix things, but more of how can I bring that sense of spirituality or wonder.
So how can I bring that sense of spirituality and wonder to other people in my community?
To yourself, for you to feel the way that you feel when you're in the redwoods. Of course, not fully that way, but something that you can, something you could do to feel that way, something like that way.
But an activity that I can measure is making us impact on other people.
Yeah, leave that for later for now.
Okay.
Think something you can do. Do you like feeling wonder and spirituality and awe?
Yeah. So, every time I make the effort to get out on a hike, I can tap into that. And the most extreme hikes I do actually are not the most challenging terrain. They're actually when I take off my shoes and hike barefoot. And I've had some interesting experiences on the trail where most people, don't make eye contact and they're like, whatever, crazy hippie. But then there's some people that stop in their tracks and say, oh my gosh, that feels so good. I did that when I was a kid. And, or they say that's so good for your body, or that's so good to be grounded and feel the earth, or so it's interesting how some people light up when they see that, and they're still in their shoes. And I haven't met other people who hike barefoot yet in my area, but I can tell that it shifts something in people when they see that. And for me, I like it because it slows me down. Sometimes when I hike, my mind is so full of chatter and it's just noise and I'm not really taking in where I am. But when you're barefoot, you have to hike slowly, look so that you don't hurt yourself, and step carefully around sharp things, look at the terrain. And so it's a completely different sort of more meditational experience for me.
So specifically, it would be something that would create these feelings. Is there something you could do between now and next week along these lines that if I ask you next week, how did it go, that you could give an answer that described it, that, a meaningful answer?
Yeah, I actually have a visit scheduled with my sister and two of her friends who I've never met, but we were going to go for a walk. So I could propose that we all go on this trail and take off our shoes and see what they think of it.
So now the people who see you on the path will see 3 people with their bare feet for a total of 6 bare feet. And okay, so now that sounds like it fits it's something you weren't already going to do, something you do yourself and with others. Is it leaving the world better than you found it? Or could it be made that way?
Yes, because I think for me, it addresses consumption. You know, what all do we have in our life that we think is absolutely necessary that sometimes we don't need? It also addresses the need to slow down, that things are accelerating and there's just so much stimulation and competition for our attention. And so even when people think that they're relaxing and getting into the outdoors, they might have this agenda of hitting a certain mileage or going a certain speed. And so I think it's nice that it shortcuts that.
All right, it sounds like that will make you better, and that's great. Will it also leave the world better than you found it in some tangible way? Because what you said is great, and I that's great, but it's not meeting this criterion. And I've learned through experience that it something changes when it clicks. So could we make it something that also leaves the world better than you found it? The world, not yourself. I mean, yourself too, but.
I mean, I can pick up trash along the way. So, I mean, I'm very familiar with your inspirational email signature tagline where you have your stats, and picking up trash is, you know, sometimes I do it and sometimes I block it out, you know, because I'm somewhere else. On a personal level, you know, there's everyone's got their impact on the world, and you can always lighten it. So, I mean, I know that I can go vegan more often, and I try and lead my life in a way that thinks about myself, but also thinks about the community and about how these big changes and shifts have to happen at a community-wide level, and that difficulty of engaging with organizations and system change in a measurable way. So
that's a little beyond the scope of what we're doing here, but I think that when we feel this joy for doing these things, it's a very different thing to bring someone joy than it is to bring someone obligation. But let's wait till next week to talk about that. So I want to make this a SMART goal. If you know the acronym, specific, measurable. Okay. So between now and next week, you have, I think you said your sister and someone else visiting.
Yeah, two of her friends.
Also, it'll be 4 of you.
Yeah.
And so you will go on a walk barefoot. At least you'll be barefoot. They might not be. You can't obligate them.
No, and some people are not comfortable doing that.
And you'll go for a walk and pick up some litter on the way. And now I want to make sure from experience that if you can decide you want to do this, but they can't. So if they say, thanks, but no thanks, I don't want to go at all, will you still be able to do it even without them?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'll go. They'll go on a walk, and I'll go with them, and I'll be barefoot, and they can have their shoes on. I mean, they're planning on going. They're the ones that, yeah, my sister initiated this, so it's scheduled.
Okay, and you'll at least also have, ideally, you'll have some feeling of channeling the Redwood experience. Okay, so that's the first Spodek method conversation. The next part is for you to do the thing. And next time we'll ask about questions about how it went, things like that. Actually, let me ask you a question here. I walked you through this process. You wouldn't have done it. In fact, I even volunteered you. Thank you for playing along.
Yeah.
So you would not have come up with this had I not led you to it. Are you doing this for me?
No, I feel like I've sort of been on this track for the last 5 years when I had my aha moment um, of wanting to make change.
Mhm.
So I feel like I've been pushing and growing in every direction in the last 5 years,
And
and tapping into what makes me joyful, what makes me motivated, and how we're all interdependent.
Mhm. So this
So
fits in with
this
something
doesn't
that's
feel
in your
foreign.
life.
It feels like sort of a narrative that I have playing in my head often enough.
Okay, intrinsically motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And if I, how do you think? I take it you anticipate you'll enjoy the experience.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I predict that however much you think you're going to enjoy it, you're going to enjoy it even more. Even taking into account what I just said,
Mm-hmm.
that when you're out there, you're going to feel like, oh, I forgot about this, and oh, that's right, there's this other thing.
I mean, ideally, if I'm doing this and they ask me why am I doing this, I can say, oh, I've done this in the past, but I had this great conversation at a workshop. And by the way, the workshop was about finding intrinsic motivation to lead more sustainable lives. And a lot of people at the workshop already are flying less. Like I think I would use it as an entry point to talk to these two women, these friends of my sister that I don't know very well.
Now, all right. So now I want to switch modes from doing this first conversation with Ariella and see if there are questions out there to about what happened. And I also want to comment. Now, I've led her to do something that wasn't specifically related to flying, but it's also just the first thing. And I'm reading, and she said that this is something that she anticipates enjoying. I don't want to lead the witness here, but I predict that when we talk next time, she'll be open to doing something yet more. And even before committing to yet more, she'll feel comfortable sharing more motivations. And, she mentioned the redwood this time. She mentioned something else. I forgot what it was, but there's like lots of things to tap into. And the more that she does some, the more she wants to do others. Do people see how this could lead to anticipating that others will like the experience of being led to do something that they weren't already going to do? I hope some people will come off mute and make this part Q&A or discussion. Let me see. Isla said that other people led up on the trail when they see her hiking barefoot, which makes me think about connecting earth and freedom. Doesn't that make the world a better place? So someone said, doesn't that make the world a better place in the chat of just walking barefoot? Yes. What I've learned from experience is not that last part of making sure that you leave the world better than you found it activates the person to the world. I'm not saying that being barefoot and people seeing that. I happen to run barefoot, full barefoot in Manhattan, and some people, I think it has an effect on people too. The point of the exercise is not to fit things into that criterion is there because when people, I predict that when she goes there, the act of picking stuff up that she wouldn't have done otherwise will be part of the experience. The act of her having to think of how does this affect the earth, not just other people. It's so easy to say, I'm going to affect lots of other people, and they'll affect lots of people, and nothing actually gets done. That activation makes a big difference. Is it anti-awe? We'll see. Let's see what happens when Ariella comes back next week. If picking up the litter, how it affected it. Did it increase the effect? Did it decrease the effect? Did it change anything else? I suspect, well, I don't want to lead the witness anymore because we'll find out next week. Intrinsic motivation doesn't always have to do with the environment directly. I really enjoy making my laundry detergent, dish soap, etc. It's fun for me. Yeah, we have lots of internal motivations. What I want to make sure I did not do was to say, here's why you should do this, and to tell her what it has to be. There's some big leader, who was it? Anyway, it's leadership is the art of getting the other person to do your thing for their reason.
Right,
So,
but you started out your conversation with Ariella saying, is there some memory that you have from your childhood about the environment and da da da? You led her into picking something that had to do with the environment. Whereas if you had asked me that question, I could have come up with something, but what is really the key to why I like making all my own stuff is that I really like doing crafts and projects. And I have had that joy my whole life.
yeah, everyone will answer the question differently.
Mhm.
And I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never gotten the same answer twice. Even people who I've heard redwoods before. I've never been to it, and it sounds insanely powerful.
It is
But
pretty great.
and no one is given what everyone says is very different, each person.
Mhm.
So I don't know what motivates people before I speak to them. So I have to wait. I have to listen before I lead. I have to listen to what's there. So if I'd done it with you, then when I asked what the environment meant to you, you would tell me different things. Even if it was the redwoods, even if you went to the redwoods with Ariella, your experience would be different. And your sensory experience might be a little different. Your emotional experience might be a little different. Next week, I'll break down what I could do it now if other people don't have questions. Let's see. Okay, so I see a question of, could you give us other examples of other things that people choose to do? All right. Yes. And it's also because it's coming from different places. So let's see. I've had people, there's a lot of things about doing things in nature that they weren't already going to do. Hikes, bike rides. A lot of people choose to do things like, instead of driving places, I'm going to walk for a week, and I'll do my errands by bike or on foot. A lot of diet related things. A lot of people have been like, oh, I've been playing around with the idea of going vegan for a week or something like that, and they'll do that. A couple of the big ones. A couple of people recycle more. Now, when someone says they're going to recycle more, and do I say to them, well, recycling doesn't really make that much of a difference. It's not really worth doing. No, I don't say that. It's their measure. It's their, I don't mind if the first thing they do is big or small. What I care is it's meaningful for them. What are some other things? There's one guy, actually, he committed to driving less over a period of, I think, a year. And he ended up deciding to sell his car in the process. Actually, some friends visited, and the car, it was a big deal for him to get this car, because he grew up poor, and he was really into James Bond, and he bought like an Aston Martin, I think, that James Bond drove, or maybe it was some Range Rover. I don't know. It was like some really special car, and it was like his sign of success. And some friend was over for dinner, and he was talking about the car, and the guy said, "Can you take me for a ride in the car?" And he says, "I'm sorry, I can't, because I've gone too far this month, and I have to not drive." And he said, "Well, can we just go sit in the car?" So they went to sit in the car, and actually the battery had died, because he hadn't driven it in so long that he couldn't get into the car because it had electric locks. Actually, another guy committed to not playing video games, which is, on the face of it, not that big of a difference to the world. Like, turning off your video game console is not that big of a deal. But the change to his life was pretty big, because he ended up, selling the console and his motorcycle. One guy committed to just using a cell phone less. And technically, that's burning less power, so polluting less. Not a bit, on the face of it, doesn't seem like a big deal. But he ended up spending more time with his wife, spending more time with his dog. The cell phone broke, the screen broke in the middle of it, just by chance. And he decided, instead of fixing it right away, he thought, okay, I'll go with it even less. And so it made a big difference, much bigger than he expected. Those are a couple examples. Should I give more? Or also, there's a lot of things that when I do these workshops, when there's time, and I say, if this were longer, I would have us break into groups, and I'd say, like, here's the script that we go through, and I have people split. and into groups. And if there's an odd number of people, someone does it with me. For a long time, I thought, not a long time, but at the beginning, I thought, I mean, I'm sure you've all read articles that are like, here's 10 little things you can do for the environment. And I thought, what'll happen when I get up to 10? There's only so many things I can do. But that's not what happened. What I found is the more that I do it, or the more that I have it done to me, the more I come up with more and more things to do and more memories to share with people. So like some of the things I've done have been things like turning off all my electronics and going outside and doing things. So I volunteer. I started singing instead of screen time, which led to getting singing lessons. There's planting stuff. There's and some of the singing has led to me discovering things that I mean, I'm getting carried away. There's a time when I went singing that I'd never really done before, and it brought tears to my eyes and I started crying because of tapping into emotions that it's very, hopefully all of you sing more than I do, but watching TV or having access to all the music that's ever been performed in a moment's notice, because I have the internet, all of that doesn't add up to me actually finding inside myself emotions that I've never shared in that way before. So I look forward to like, what's going to happen the next time that I do this? What am I going to find that I haven't done before? That is, it's wonderful. I see India went off mute or put a video on, and she has done the workshop twice. Did I read you right that you have something to share? Are you muted?
Hi, Josh. No, I was really paying attention to listen, but I just finished the dinner, so I wanted to at least participate better mode. But yeah, I mean, for my cases, once our car was stolen back in September, my partner was immediately, buying a new car. But then I really started getting a different thought, like, what if we don't have one for a while? Because I was taking your workshop for a while. So really made me to rethink, maybe let's just hold off and not use car. And I'm happy that way because I'm taking more walk and biking, and it's just like having less stress driving. So that's nice. Yeah.
And Conrad, do you mind if I ask you, because you're someone who I walked through the Spodek method a few times, and you came to me and said you were going to stop flying. I don't think I talked to you. Did I try to motivate you not to fly?
I'm sure it's possible. You gave me the broader influence of your leadership and how that took me down my path, but I want to say the initiative was really my own. The situation that had occurred, I have been, for everyone who's doesn't know me, my family and I, born and raised in Florida, in South Florida, and where I'm currently here now in Fort Lauderdale. Before this, I had been living in Austin, Texas, Wilmington, North Carolina. I had been pretty frequent in my travels, and being so far away from home had become a norm for me since graduating from high school, because I went to go study up north and just I was under that guise of exploration and learning new things. And my dad is now, I'm 28 years old. My dad is 97. It has always been an important subject matter for me, especially in my adult age, to recognize the importance of spending time with my dad. And what I had found at some point during the course of my having lived so many years away from home, I was like, what in the world am I doing? Why am I dedicating so much time away from family when family is what matters so much to me? There's a lot of factors involved in that, but the equation on the whole about that decision shifted at some point. And the intrinsic motivation just became, it seems so silly that I would be away from my family for such long periods of time. Like, why not just spend as much time with them as humanly possible, given the luxuries I have with my work and just what's possible. So yeah, I made the commitment. And then I kind of cemented it by saying, yeah, like once I fly home, I don't need to fly anymore. I've made, and I think this was brought up at some point by someone at the very beginning of the call surrounding taking the train. That's actually something that I have done to kind of get my travels going from a long distance perspective. But yeah, to answer your question, Josh, I don't think the lack of flying was in principle you didn't directly push me in any respect. I made that decision.
Do you remember when we did the Spodek method, do you remember what you did? What you committed to that time?
Funny enough, I'm thinking back to when we were interacting while I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I remember that Spodek method initiative for some reason. I remember when I was when I made the decision to start purchasing food that didn't come with packaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down that path. And I also had committed to walking to the supermarket where I was able to purchase no packaging food as well. So I put those two commitments together. For some reason, that's the initiative that's coming back to me. I can't quite recall any others right now at this moment.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I remember it was food related because this is beyond the scope, but he's also doing a lot of stuff with markets and salvaging food now, if I remember right. And
so yeah.
So I wanted to get across to people that I didn't tell him not to fly, but he got there on his own. And he's got his reasons for doing it. But if I think that if I'd given him a bunch of facts, and the other way, I have not found success with that. I've generally found people pushing back. Sandy came on video. So I think she has a question. You're muted, and I think you're saying you finished eating just like Inya did, and now you're ready to, okay. You're being social.
That's right. Though I can share, but I don't have a question. Yeah.
So I'm going to put in the chat a link to, this was a time when I was on Seth Godin's or it's not his podcast, but it's podcasted in his community, when someone that I taught the Spodek method to okay, so let me get some backstory. I don't know if people know Seth Godin, but he came out with a book called the Carbon Almanac, and there's a whole community of people, of his fans that I was a part of that helped make this book. And they've also made a podcast called, I think, the Carbon Sessions, something like that. Now, I didn't know this, but they said, hey, let's get this guy Josh Spodek on our podcast. So they contacted me, and one of the people said, oh, I know that guy. I follow his blog. I'd like to be the guy who interviews him. So Brian and I appeared on the podcast, and Brian hosted me. We got to talking, and he learned the Spodek method from me. And also, so on the link, you'll see there's a podcast at the top and then 3 videos at the bottom. The 3 videos are me teaching him the Spodek method. You can see everything I did for how to learn how to do it. And then they weren't designed to be teaching tools. They were, they weren't designed. I haven't made like a formal course yet. I'm in the process of doing that, but it's all there. At the top of the podcast, you'll hear after we did those videos at the bottom, he and the other host is like December, and they're talking about, what are you going to do for next year? Do you have any resolutions? And then Brian says, yeah, I'm going to do this thing that came up with doing the Spodek method with Josh. And the other host is like, what's that? And you can hear them kind of stumbling into, well, I'll do it with you. And he does it with her. And then she has this experience of, I think it was with strawberries, something related to her father. And you can hear it happening. And you hear everything, all the teaching that went into it. So that if you would like to, Ariella, how do you feel about the experience that we went through? Was it positive, negative?
It was positive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm left with more questions and introspection. I think something to mention about what I've been thinking about a lot for the last 5 years. I was really inspired by Peter Kalmus's statement that we need 1 billion climate activists
mm-hmm.
to make the transformation necessary to have a livable future. And so I sort of think about that. What more can I do
mm-hmm.
in every aspect of my career and of my, I feel like I've become a climate activist in my spare time organizing several campaigns and participating in lots of rallies, marches, signing petitions, meeting with, making public statements. And so there's this intrinsic personal individual behavior, and then there's everything else. And the personal behavior feels very incremental. And then there's everything else of, well, I feel different, but is the world around me different? And how do I keep pushing and nudging the world towards more sustainability? So I feel that I struggle with figuring that out.
Okay. So what I didn't hear was I feel negative. I didn't hear you say I felt coerced into doing something or cajoled or convinced into doing something. And we haven't done it yet. So we'll see what happens next week. But I think that you'll have a yet more positive experience there. We're open to things not going as planned. But if that happens, hopefully we'll have this feeling of I can make people feel good about this. Now, the first thing isn't a big change. I'm not saying like we're going to single-handedly get all the carbon down to 200 or whatever parts per million or whatever, that we're going to fix all the ocean plastic. But if feel that we can, if the more that I share it, the more others will share it, and the more they'll feel good about it, and they'll want to share something rewarding. That's a movement. That it's very different than having to push each time, if each time accelerates more. So someone said, can you walk us through how doing this leads to someone not flying, even if you don't mention it as an option? All right, the first time, not likely to happen. Even the second time, not likely to happen. But that is not going to do generally really big things. It's the meaning and the purpose that they feel, the curiosity. Like if you give someone facts that hasn't yet had an expectation that it's going to be rewarding, that often feels to them like guilt and shame. Like if you say this many people are dying from breathing polluted air, or there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish, and therefore you shouldn't do X or Y, that often will make them feel like push back. With this method, when it goes well, they feel like they want to do it. Then we'll see what happens next time. But I predict that Ariella will do a bit more than she committed to. And I predict that she'll have experiences that if she really thought about it, she might be like, oh, I know X is going to happen or Y is going to happen. But when it happens, like she's going to be like, oh, wow, I knew I was going to like it for this reason, but I forgot about that reason. And if I then tap into that and say, maybe would you like to do something again, something newer? She's very likely to. And the next time she does it, it'll be significantly bigger. And the next time she does it, it'll be even yet bigger. And then people find these things out on their own. After you've had this mindset shift, then people start looking things up and being like, wait a minute, if I can enjoy driving less, if that's not what she committed to, but if I can enjoy driving less, what else can I do less of that I would enjoy more? Mm-hmm. And they start coming back with these things. That motivation is. Someone says something. Mm-hmm. So you sacrifice magnitude and direction the first time you do it, but you gain motivation and meaning. And more than a lot of people doing a lot or a little, I'm not going to say a lot of people doing little things adds up. That's not the point. It's people wanting to do it so that they get to big things and they want to share joy, liberation, fun, freedom. People sharing something that other people then want to share, that other people want to share, that other people want to share. That's a movement. That's big. What do we want to share? Do we want to share? And what do we want to share? I'll be quiet for a bit in case there are questions. I think we're at the hour. So if people have to go, people have to go. But I'm sticking around if people have questions. Also much more pleasurable than a plane ride. Yeah, the first things they do are really, it's intrinsic for themselves. They'd like to do it. Now, it may be that you're listening to this and thinking, I don't want to walk barefoot. I don't want to pick up litter. We have to be careful not to project onto the other person she's doing it for her reasons. So everyone's reasons are going to be, some may resonate, some may not. But for her intrinsic motivation is the relevant thing. Sandy looks like she has a question. She's pondering something.
I'm just taking it in. I have like quite a few thoughts. I'll just share a little bit about my journey with this and why I'm here, maybe. Since, I mean, unless you have, I don't want to interrupt what you're.
I'd like to get feedback from people and comment on if there's things that if questions or things come up, and something may come up. And if others have something, you know, put your hand up or pop in. But Sandy, what were you going to say?
Well, Ariella, we haven't met, but I'm on your mailing list, I think, because I'm also been a part-time and increasing climate activist. And in 2019, I was at a climate rally at Cal, and your husband had a table there, and we chatted, and I got on your mailing list. And then I worked at Pixar at that time. I worked there for a really long time, and left during the lockdown, the pandemic lockdown. But coincidentally, like a day or two later, Peter Kalmus was there to give a talk, and I met him, and he said, "Oh, do you know my friend Ariella?" And I'm like, "No, I just met her husband though." But I'd already been, yeah. So I'd already been thinking about flying less when I met him. I divide my time between Portland, Oregon, and here in Oakland. I have family in Portland, very elderly parents, and I would kind of hop on a plane to Portland without a thought. And then I just started feeling increasingly uncomfortable about that, juxtaposed with my climate activism. And I thought, you know, I want to go for longer trips. I'll drive up, I'll stay longer, fewer but longer trips, and reduce my carbon footprint. And then I met your husband, and I thought, well, gosh. And I had a year of really flying a lot when I was doing my master's at Penn in 2015 and 2016, and flew back and forth across the country. And again, I was feeling like, well, this is great for me, but really bad for the climate. And so I thought, could I take a year off of flying to offset that? And then I met him, and I thought, God, it'd be so hard to take a year off of flying. Could I reduce it by half or 2/3? And then the lockdown happened, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm not flying. And 6 months in, I'm like, well, it's been half a year. I can definitely not fly for the rest of the year. So I've had taken one round trip flight in the last 4 years, which is such a dramatic reduction. And it was so miserable, like, compared to the train trips and, you know, and my road trips and, you know, switching to a hybrid car. And so that's kind of my journey. And the reason I'm here, well, there's a bunch of reasons that I came to this. One, that I just feel like I do like too much of the thing that you described at the beginning, Josh, of like just trying to proselytize to people. It just just kind of comes out when people say what they're doing. I'm like, oh, I used to do that, but you know, and it is alienating. But my grad school program has quite a robust community, and when it's positive psychology. You may know this, Josh, positive psychology at Penn.
At Penn, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a master, and I go to these on-sites. I mean, again, I've only been this once in October, which was my one flight in the last 4 years, because I was invited to give a talk. It's a really big deal for me. And I did talk about bringing more activism into the well-being community, like using your own well-being as a springboard to contribute in some way to, and that has to be the well-being of interconnectedness with the planet. And it got a really great response. And that's turned into me and a couple other people spearheading a climate action group within, I mean, these on-sites, there's so much waste and unsustainable practices. And even when I was in school there, like being from California, the backward, like how much less developed things are in terms of compost and recycling and stuff than they are in California was really shocking to me. And so we're starting this climate and sustainability action group, and I can't come next week because our first meeting was already scheduled for the same time. But I wanted to get a sense of how to, like, it's been very helpful for me to get a sense of how to talk to people about who are interested in doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my.
Thank you for sharing. It made me think of a couple things, if you don't mind my adding,
Yeah.
that a really big thing happens when you have maybe 5 people that you've done this with in your life, because now you're swimming downstream. Because, I don't know, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And the 5 people you spend the most time with might not necessarily be the people that you do this with, because, parents aren't always as non-judgmental supportive as other people, and they might be the people you spend time with. But when a few people around you are doing it, and you do it with them and they do it with you, so we're all doing stuff together, and it's different. Sometimes it's together. Suddenly it's swimming downstream, and it's very different than to have a few people that are with you, that you don't have to defend yourself to, and they don't misunderstand. That's a really big deal. And then as it works out, that if I do it with 5 people, and then they all want to have 5 people in their lives that they're doing it with, again, a movement going of people enjoying it. Also, a lot of times, all right, if I'm at some event and someone's like, "Oh, you're into sustainability," and they start talking to me, it's often some version of like paper versus plastic. And it doesn't have to be paper versus plastic, but it can be like, "Oh, well, actually, did you know that sustainable airplane fuels are going to blah, blah, blah." What I've learned is that if that happens, if I switch into the Spodek, I don't say to them, "Hey, let me do the Spodek method instead." But I just start asking, "Well, is the environment something that matters to you?" And then, what does the environment mean to you? The change in the tone of the conversation becomes, I could do this, I could do that. I haven't thought about that. Maybe I'll very different than this argumentative back and forth of really, it looks like it's argument back and forth about facts and knowledge and stuff like that. But it's really everyone being like, as long as I don't have to do anything. It's just like, it's a relief that, okay, let's point fingers at government and corporations and everyone, but like, let's all agree that it's not us, that whatever we do doesn't matter. But that's not rational. They're not thinking that. It's just, that's how it works out. But this changes all that. It changes it to, oh, if I do this, then what more can I do? And, I want to do this. I want to do more. I'll be quiet for a bit in case there are other questions or comments. I hope this was useful for people. And I hope people are very curious to hear Ariella next week. How did it go? I'm also curious if people are thinking to themselves of their experiences that are their equivalent of the Redwoods. And it's hard. This generally works best one-on-one or one in front of an audience if you're doing a group thing, but not and you have to have at least enough time. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, but oh yeah, to do it one-on-one and to do it both ways. It doesn't really work so well if you try to do it to yourself. If you ask yourself, what's my experience in nature? It doesn't work as well as if someone else asks, especially if the other person has done it enough times that they really give you time to share it and you really explore it. Ariella was great. Right off the bat, she was talking about those redwoods. Oh man, I got to visit them. So I got to get off the bike and ride there at some point. I keep saying I'll be quiet and then I keep not being quiet. Any other comments or questions? People are sticking around, so I think they have some. So I see Josh's hand and I see Jess come off video too.
Go ahead.
So Jess, do you have anything? Did you come off video to ask or say anything?
Yes, I did. So I'm at the very beginning of my sustainability journey, and I'm really hoping to become the sustainability champion at my workplace. So I guess just coming off the back of your comment that it's better to do it like in a one-on-one sort of setting or one-on-one in front of a group, how would you sort of suggest expanding that out to include like an entire group? Would it be like a one-on-one gradual sort of process for everybody, or would that just sort of be enough to sort of drive that sort of conversation, I guess, just doing that one-on-one, that one sort of person?
Yeah, great question. There's this other guy named Jim who did the workshop. And before he did it, so he works at it's an agricultural supply company. They supply a lot of phosphorus. If you look at the company's site, it's like, we're the greenest company ever. And he's like, we're not remotely green. That's just, greenwashing. But he's really into sustainability. He asked how can I bring this to my company? Because they want it, but they're not doing it. And I don't really know how to do it. So when I did the Spodek method with him, he wanted to bring it to the company. That was the goal. And I met him at the ISSP, International Society for Sustainability Professionals, something like that. And I said, let's not worry about that now. Let's just do this exercise. And so when he came with the exercise, instead of coming up with something work related, he talked about his, he's Canadian and he lives in Western Canada, but his family has land in Eastern Canada. And that was a really meaningful thing for him. So it's something about, I don't remember the details, but it was something about connecting with a garden that he had at his home. He was gonna be home for him doing that. He really enjoyed it. When he came back to Vancouver, I forget where, Western Canada, he got connected with a local park and he started doing what he did there. He started doing what he did at his home, at his family home. He started doing at his not workplace, but his local place there. And he's experiencing joy in both places. And he starts sharing with people at his office what's going on. And they start saying, tell us more. And then he got invited to be on the sustainability committee. And then I think he's heading the sustainability committee. The practicing it himself is what I'm getting at, is the more that you do it yourself, the more you see what there's to be done. And the more you start sharing with people around you, it's not obligation. It's not telling people what to do. If I felt like I was trying to get people to do stuff that they didn't want to do, I wouldn't do this. My definition of leadership is helping people do what they already wanted to do, but haven't figured out how. So what I'm trying to do is help people help people people want to do stuff that's less polluting, but they don't know how. But the goal isn't pollute less. It's first connect with nature more, and then realize that's what we're working on. So if you want to do something at your company or you want to get something motivated in your community, I would say do it yourself, like get the technique down, do it a couple times in both directions with a few people so that you see what's going on with them. Again, it's not, the first couple times you do it, it doesn't always work. It takes a little practice. It's just like learning any skill, like you play scales on the piano, you don't play it right the first couple times and you got to put your reps in. But when it really works, you see the other people coming back and be like, thank you for getting me to do that thing. And you're like, I was just doing this, following the script. And also when someone does it with you and they do it very well, and you start tapping into something, you're like, oh, I haven't thought about that time that I was under the stars when I was a kid. Or the time I was off in the desert and I just heard the wind on the dunes. So I'm talking about things that people talked about when I've done the Spodek method with them lately. And you feel like, oh my God, I haven't thought about that in a while. And then you do something and maybe it's picking up litter, but when it's motivated from something, the picking up litter might be like, that reminds me of that star. There's one guy who, sorry, stop me if I'm going on too long. He was from Kazakhstan and he told me that apples, that's where humans first discovered apples. Some, I don't know, 100,000 years ago or something like that. And so there were apparently some types of apples that have never been brought out of Kazakhstan. And he misses them. And the apples are something very special to them. And when I said, is there something you do to act on it? And we walked through. Now, this is going to sound like, what does that have to do with apples? But for him, it made sense. He committed to not taking taxis every other Friday. The middle steps, there was a lot of middle steps to where he got that, but that's what was for him, his experience with the apple. Because some of those apples, I forget if I just said this or not, but some of those groves of cultivars or whatever you call them, the species that have never made it out of Kazakhstan, he said are now housing developments. They're gone forever. The world doesn't have them anymore. And that led to not taking taxis every other Friday. How did I get on that? I forget. But it's just that it's acting on these things that intrinsic and we want to share. Did I get too far off track or was that useful for you? Did that answer your question?
That was, yes, thank you.
It's really doing the reps. The more, and also, next time I'll go through and describe like step by step what I did and why at each step so that you can do it. I mean, I also explain it in those videos, but they're kind of long. And I'll also talk about, we'll see what happens next and how she feels about it next time. And there'll probably be more questions. And hopefully a couple people will listen to that, we'll go to that link that I gave, and we'll try it once or twice with people if they get through the first couple of videos of me with Brian. Now, there's no obligation because they're long and they're not like they're not like full of 3D videos and stuff like that or whatever. But it does give you the ability to do it. And it can be a really rewarding experience. If you do it, I recommend sticking with the basics, doing it like step by step. Not trying to improvise the first couple times.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm also available. Like I want to make this a full workshop available for everyone. If we get enough people that want to do it, then we could arrange to do like a full workshop is 2 hours, 6 sessions, where we really get into it and people practice with each other, and we get to hear each other's experiences, and we get to see it happen. We get to feel it happen to ourselves. And then we see others make mistakes, and we make mistakes ourselves. And we say, oh, I see why they did it that way. I see how to do it better. And sometimes if the group is up for it, then we do a group project where we do something more than the sum of a bunch of individuals. So I'm not pushing that, but I consider Flight for USA on the vanguard of sustainability, because we're doing things that other people are not, that other people are afraid of, and we embrace it. And I would love to make it from, like, at first I thought, oh, I'd love if I could get everyone in Flight for USA to get one other person, then we double the number of people who pledge. If every pledge got one other person, that's double. But even that is just like, that's just changing the level. I want to change the slope. If everyone feels like I can get more people, then the longer I keep going, the more people I get. And then that's the slope. If I can get other people to do that, that's the second derivative. If I'm not geeking out too much for you guys, but I got a PhD in physics, so I can talk about calculus. So if we can even accelerate, or dare I say, go viral and exponential growth of people sharing joy and fun, of people sharing, of expecting gratitude, that, and when someone says, I'll do something like just use my cell phone less for a week, and you say, well, that's really small. But we don't say that. We think that. We think, well, how could that really add up to anything? And then we do it another time with that person. Next thing you know, that person's selling their car or something like that. It's incredible.
I wanted to suggest, I feel lucky that I got to share my story today, but all the participants who are still on, and I can contact those who already left. Maybe it would be helpful to pair up with, a stranger from this call and just have that conversation of how did you get here? And, a light Spodek method, just to start getting practice with those ideas and talking to a stranger about them. And this is, a supportive community because we're all here. We all got to this level, but it would be good practice. So.
Yeah, and actually to do the full Spodek method the first time takes a bit of practice, but to ask people, what does the environment mean to you? And just, if you just go to 5, 10 people, just in regular conversation, you don't have to go out of your way, but in conversation, if you ask people, different people grow up in different areas. What, if you think of nature, what do you think of? And then if they share something and you say, could you take us there? What was a sensory experience? And I like to say, what do you hear, smell, taste, touch? What's the last one? Feel. And then if you really want to go for it, tend to say, can you name some emotions? Just that, people generally like it. The next stage is the more complicated one of leading them to come up with something that they do. So unless people are really gung-ho, I would just stick with, ask a lot of people, what does the environment mean to you? And then just go there with them. Not to talk over, not to talk. It's tempting to say, oh, that reminds me of my thing, but hold off on that as long as you can, to let them explore more and see how their face changes, how the pace of conversation changes. I bet no one gets yelled at. No one gets angry.
Is there anybody here that would like a soft introduction to other workshop participants to have that casual conversation between now and next week?
I'm certainly game. So it feels to me like people are not asking any more questions. I want to be available if any come up, but also since I'm off the grid and I'm not at home, I don't have a battery and my computer is giving me a warning that I don't have that much longer on my, before I have to turn off. But I do want to answer questions if any come up, or just if people have anything they want to share that others might benefit from. Peter, you're welcome.
So my question was for Sandy, maybe, and maybe you. Is there anything in positive psychology that corroborates any studies that would suggest that the Spodek method is likely to succeed, or anything that would challenge that would approach the question of motivation differently? And maybe it's a question for offline, but it seems like you've got positive psychology seems like a very powerful resource that draws a lot of interest, and yeah, it seems like it would be a very useful dialogue. From the little I know about it.
Say anything to that? I mean, I have a few thoughts, but it's not my workshop. It's not my workshop. Do you? I mean, certainly there's research on intrinsic motivation being right, and being the best motivator. Lots of research on that.
Yeah, I certainly went through a lot of Seligman on my way here. And Chick Sent Me High, and yeah, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Marty and I are not politically aligned, but I and he's been a great influence on the psychology world, but I'm sort of part of a growing cohort of people who want to combine. I mean, so to answer Joshua's question, to bring more social justice and activism into positive psychology. What they're and my talk that I referenced was partly about that. And then we've had a huge response to this, starting this group actually. Josh, we're starting it with these 3 meetings next week with The Week. Do you know that program? The Week. I'll send it up.
The people from Europe, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll stick it in the chat for anyone who's interested. Give me a second to do that. But the other thing is there's a lot of research that people are happier and more equitable, more fair, right? Societies and systems and organizations. And that kind of speaks to the sustainability piece, right? There's like a more emphasis on human sustainability, and that there's more well-being and happiness, right? I mean, like, my belief is we need to change to a more well-being based system, and that has to include well-being of the planet. But the research to back that up, that that people are more naturally inclined to more fairness and equity, and you can't really have that when you have people like in the global south, like the health effects of mining for our phone batteries and stuff, like that whole thing just doesn't hold up when you really start to think about well-being. And that's been the problem with positive psychology, and every precursor to positive psychology is it's still been hierarchical, with well-being, being available for the people at that top of the heap and the other people supporting that, right? And that's we have this huge global system that's based on that. And that same system has been so destructive for planet. So.
So I'm going to say to people that since you've stuck around, you may have questions and comments. Please feel free. I think everybody has my email. So please feel free to contact me between now and next week. And let's sign off for now. And I'll be available. And I'll hope to see everyone next week too.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you too.
Bye.
Bye.